Hey guys, my name is Shai and this is Evermind Astro. This video is about Jupiter in Aquarius. Might also resonate if you've got Jupiter in the 11th house. So, funny story, okay? As soon as I sat down to do this video, as soon as I tuned into the energy, a bunch of noise started happening, right? The noise of people. My neighbors making some noise, and I started getting a bunch of emails, and like all this stuff started coming in, and I was like, wow, because like a minute ago, before I tuned into the energy of Jupiter in Aquarius, everything was rather calm and peaceful and solitary, right? And so I do read, when I read energy, right, I read the energy as it shows up in my reality, and I do think this sudden influx of people like populating my reality and the noise of people, the energy of people, right? That is, at least to an extent, one part of this type of placement, right? It is the energy of people, the energy of others showing up in your reality. And so Jupiter in Aquarius, right? You got Jupiter bringing expansion, bringing abundance, and you got Aquarius bringing in the collective consciousness and the collective, and the 11th house, that thing about friends and social networks and stuff like that. So I mean, Aquarius is very complex and there's a lot to talk about with Aquarius. I could really go down the rabbit hole with Aquarius, but to try and keep this just a little bit general, right? Those are some of the first things we think about when we think Aquarius. And there is one thing I want to zero in on first, is if you're watching this because you have a Jupiter in this 11th house, specifically like some other sign, but in the 11th house, that I think is a particularly supportive placement, because one thing we don't always talk about with the 11th house is, yes, it's friends, yes, it's the collective consciousness, and yes, it's the social network, and yes, it can be advanced technology and arts and stuff like that. It is also how the universe supports you, okay? How are you supported by the universe? This is a little bit of a sore spot for me, guys, because I have Lilith in the 11th house and like no other Aquarius or 11th house energy. So when you have a compromised 11th house, you feel like the universe or the collective or society is not supporting you, like, and that's like a thing you work through, right? So as opposed to having Jupiter in the 11th house, there is in your life some type of fundamental theme of actually being supported or at least expanded by the universe. And I don't mean to say that everybody with this placement is going to feel like society is supporting them. If that's obviously not going to be the case, right? But there is something good, something beneficial, something supportive here. And it could be like maybe your interaction with your friends or your interaction with society or your interaction with the universe at large, that expands you, right? That it supports your expansion because we have Jupiter here. It could be that you receive some type of abundance, right? Whether it's an abundance of energy, whether it's a material abundance, or just an abundance of social connections, right? An abundance of networking, right? There's something here that supports you. So that doesn't mean that your life is like magical and easy just because you have this placement. But do think about how you have received support from the network that is larger than yourself, right? That is part of this placement. I would say honestly, even more so for the 11th house people than the Aquarius people. So there's that, right? And how I feel this, I actually feel this energy is being quite neutral, right? I know I was just talking about how it can be a very benevolent and supportive energy for you, but it is also like a neutral type of energy, and I don't know how to really articulate that. It's just when I tune into this, usually when I'm tuning into Jupiter, I'm feeling this like big, explosive, fiery, expansive energy. And I feel like the combination of Jupiter in Aquarius, that's toned down a little bit. It feels more neutral, right? It feels more neutral. Not in a bad way, also not really in like a good way either. In like a true neutral kind of way, there's a neutrality to this placement. That's the biggest thing I actually feel about this, is there's a neutrality to this placement, okay? Because you got to think of Aquarius, fixed air energy, right? Fixed air energy. And I have a little bit of a beef with the way people, like when you just look on the internet and you start just typing in Aquarius, right? There seems to be like this line of thinking where Aquarius energy is all love and light, and it's like the most beautiful, loving energy that is going to cure the universe of everything. And like as long as it's Aquarius, it's perfect and beautiful and wonderful and loving. And yes, there's an element to Aquarius energy that is that really brings love in and is the kind of loving energy that connects us all, right? There is definitely that, like the energy of the humanitarian and interdependence and taking care of one another. That is definitely part of Aquarius energy, but that is not the be-all, end-all of Aquarius energy, and not all placements are like vibing like that all of the time, right? Because Aquarius energy is also, it can be rather cold in a kind of mechanical kind of way. Hard to describe, but it's like this is either going to resonate or it's not, right? So either you get what I mean here or you don't, and like that's fine, just take it or leave it. Like that is how I sense this Aquarius energy. And I don't have any Aquarius placements, right? And as I did say, I have a Lilith in the 11th, so that is my bias, right? I think I always mention, I try to mention some of my placements when I do these videos, because it's important to recognize the bias of the astrologer, right? Or just anybody sharing their opinion, because nobody can interpret an astrological placement or an energy without bias. We're all interpreting it through our own perspective, through our own like birth chart, right? So that's why I mentioned my placement, because you're getting my biased opinion. You're getting my biased interpretation, and no interpretation is without bias. And that is what it is, right? That's why this is not about, these videos are not about this is the one truth, right? It's just about here's my perspective. It comes along with my bias. Take it or leave it. Do whatever you want with it. I'm just putting it out there. And it's funny that I'm kind of on this, ranting about this a little bit, because maybe this even has something to do with this Jupiter in Aquarius type of placement, right? Maybe it does. I'm not sure. Anyway, what I was trying to say is like the neutrality of this placement and Aquarius being fixed air, because there can be a kind of fixedness. I see Aquarius as, sometimes I see it as the constellation of stars, other times I see it as like a snowflake. Perfectly unique and beautiful, and in this like, but in like a fixed pattern, right? It has crystallized into a pattern. So that makes this actually a little bit of a, that's why this is like an interesting placement. I almost feel like Jupiter and Aquarius are kind of canceling each other out, because Jupiter wants to grow and expand and accumulate and move and groove and transcend. But Aquarius, even though it is very kind of holistic and, you know, there is an element to it that's about unity, consciousness, and all of that, but it doesn't really want to change. It doesn't really want to grow. Although we're going to be seeing Aquarius energy evolving and changing because of the next 20 years, right? Pluto's going to be transiting through Aquarius, so it's going to be interesting. Actually, those of you with Jupiter and Aquarius, you're going to have sometime in the next 20 years Pluto transit over your Jupiter. And you don't really hear people talk about that, right? We talk about Pluto transiting over your sun or your moon, stuff like that, but it's going to go over your Jupiter, and that's going to be a significant time for you, right? Where you will be challenged to expand through upheaval and transformation, right? And perhaps through encountering like power struggles through energies that try to control you. Yeah, let me take a minute and talk about just a few tiny little things about what you might encounter as Pluto transits over your Jupiter in Aquarius. So when Pluto, this is just, going to have something in common with the other Aquarius placements for people that are encountering the Pluto transit through their Aquarius placements, is that you could find yourself challenged to stand up and fight for something, to stand up and fight for your right, to stand up and fight for, like, hey, it's like you can't get away with that, right? Like you can't just put the little people down. And there could be this tension between like the man, right? The big people with the power, and the common man, like the normal people, the little people. And that language is problematic. Okay, that language is problematic, but I use that language because it tells you it gets my point across, right? Like it really just kind of example that comes up is maybe you could find yourself in a situation where you're in some kind of like apartment building, right? Some kind of community situation. It could be an apartment building or like your town or just something, right? Something where you're in a community of people and maybe some kind of developer comes along and is going to like demolish your building, or it gets sold out from under people and they're getting kind of screwed over. Maybe there's even something illegal going on, or maybe it's just really, really shady, right? And, you could find yourself normally, maybe you would just let that go and you would just move and you would just move on and be like, what am I going to do? Am I going to take him to court? Right? Like, I don't have the money to take him to court and stuff like that. But with this placement, you could find yourself, like when Pluto comes along, right, you could find yourself you just can't tolerate it. You just can't let this slide. And you could find yourself going through a process of self-expansion by like entering the power struggle with this controlling entity, right? And that can be, that might suck to have to go through, right? But it's to do with like the whole community, right? You could find yourself part of some kind of class action lawsuit or something like that. But the point is that it expands you through this, right? The process of going through this power struggle will expand you in some way, and it will also like expand your sense of community and expand your connection to the collective consciousness in some way. So kind of interesting. What else? I feel like with this placement, let's focus on the friends aspect, right? The social media. With this placement, you could do really well in social media. You might work in social media or PR, but that's not going to resonate for everybody, right? And then there's also a little bit of element of seeing yourself in a higher light. Similar to the Venus in Aquarius. Venus in Aquarius people and Jupiter in Aquarius, sometimes Venus and Jupiter can be kind of similar depending on what aspects of it you're looking at. You could really enjoy, like living in Manhattan type of thing, right? Or whatever the equivalent of Manhattan is in your city, right? Kind of going to fine dining, going to, dressing up and going out to nice places and kind of enjoying that luxurious kind of lifestyle, right? Because not necessarily because you really care about like being upper class or something like that. That's not really it. It's that engaging in kind of more upper crust style events where you get to really dress up that can make you feel like you are expressing and experiencing an aspect of yourself that you don't normally get to, right? It's actually about your own expansion and your own development rather than any kind of like fixation on money or class or anything like that, right? It's like wanting to stay in a nice hotel because then you get to feel like you're in this nice kind of expanded place, right? It could really challenge you to actually see yourself in a higher light and see others in a higher light. I don't know how else to express that, right? And okay, so back to the friendship thing with this is, that's the thing about Jupiter, okay, is that it's not always like super perfectly easy, right? It's not always super perfectly easy. Just because you have Jupiter in Aquarius at 11th house doesn't mean that you're just going to have like really awesome, wonderful friendships all of the time with no challenges. What you might find is that maybe you have maybe friendships or people or acquaintances, could it even be coworkers, really just people, right? People, and however you interact with people, that they seem to just populate your life, right? They're around, right? You're never really feeling, with this placement, I would be honestly surprised if you have extended periods of extreme isolation, unless there's something else going on in your chart, or if you're having a specific transit with that triggers that, right? This isn't really a solitary energy, not like by itself. It would be something else, right? Something else in your chart would be triggering that isolation, not the Jupiter in Aquarius itself, because if this placement is like functioning healthily and well and just kind of normally, right, I would say you would have a rather wide group of acquaintances and probably have a few close friends, right, and you feel pretty much like you have a social sphere, right, comfortable in your social sphere. But that doesn't mean that these friendships are always easy, because you could find yourself challenged to expand through your friendships, right? Working on your friendships, developing your friendships, really understanding how to connect with other people, especially in groups, right? Like group friendships, because like one-on-one friendships, that's more of like the Libra 7th house situation. But with Aquarius, it's having like a group of friends, like literally the TV show Friends, right? Having that group of friends. But you might have to work like work on that and build that and expand that, right? It could be an expansive challenge for you to really understand and develop what it means to be part of a larger network, right? So yeah, it's 15 minutes. I've been trying to keep these Jupiter videos shorter, so I'm going to leave that at that. Just some food for thought. Links down below, guys. Check me out, and I'll talk to you later. Bye.